Tony D and Little Joan with a response to the quartering. He did a video called Hollywood Strike Collapses, Bill Maher and Drew Barrymore Abandon Woke Writers. Ha! Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. Links in the description. Comedy Horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys. Books 1 through 12. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. I will be at the comic book store at 4 o'clock today in Glassboro, just off the Rowan College campus. Hope to see you there. Okay. So, again, this is not internet drama. I'm not mad at anybody. I'm not mad at Jeremy. I just wanted to clarify some of the things he commented on that I don't think are totally accurate. I mean, he has his own opinion. He has his own point. I'm not trying to start internet drama. I'm also not really trying to defend Bill Maher, although kinda, sort of. I don't want to misrepresent myself there. I work for Politically Incorrect. I never met Bill Maher. I call him my old boss as kind of a joke. But I did write jokes for the show, and I would watch the show all the time to see if he used my jokes. I talked to some of the producers, and I had a friend who was one of the warm-up comics for him. So I don't have a particular inside track. I just knew slightly more than anybody else when he was doing that show about the scuttlebutt on Bill. I would hear things. Not a lot, but a few things. Mostly I think it's mostly public knowledge. But Jeremy in the video talks that Bill is worth $200 million, and why didn't he just pay for his writers instead of going back on? Well, it's easier said than done. Now, in order to be a player in Hollywood at Bill's level, to make the money he makes, you can't live in an apartment. Not really. Like in New York, I guess you could live in an apartment because the apartments there are millions of dollars. They're in giant high-rises and there are several floors, and that's the way it is in New York. In LA, where he's based out of, you need to have a house. He can't just have any house. He's a wealthy celebrity. I mean, you can't just have any house because he needs security. I mean, he's worth a lot of money. So, how much money is he worth, though? Well, according to Celebrity Net Worth, he's worth $140 million. And as I said before, I don't think this site is particularly accurate. It's kind of a guide. But, they say his salary is $10 million a year, and it's not really how it works. His salary is $285,000 a show. If they make all those shows, then a cumulative, he makes $10 million. That's a pretty good gig. I'm not lying. He's one of the highest paid comics out there. Certainly one of the highest paid guys who host a show the way he does. Is he worth $140 million? Maybe, but part of that was his investments. In 2012, and he was worth a lot of money then too, probably because of the ABC show. Like, initially he had Politically Incorrect, and before that he had been in a few movies, but he was the host of Politically Incorrect on Comedy Central. The word is, Comedy Central doesn't pay that much. Although I will say, interestingly enough, and Jeremy talks about this in his videos, about too many writers. We had too many writers on the show. It was very clear they had too many guys faxing in jokes because they told us to all write jokes on the same articles on USA Today. And so some of those jokes are pretty obvious. So somebody would write a joke, and then I'd write it, and then 3 other people would write it, and they'd have 5 guys turn in the same joke. And I assume if they used that joke, they would just go, oh, just pay them all. Which, kind of a waste of money. And they had in-house writers on the show, too. So they had guys, Bill has writers. He's a big comedian. He writes his own jokes. So it's very competitive. But I was happy just to be a part of things because I needed the credit, and I've been talking about it ever since. As far as the union goes, when they moved the show to ABC, then big money came in. The show got huge on Comedy Central. They moved it to ABC, and they became a union shop, and that's when I was out because I wasn't in the union, and I didn't know how to get in. They weren't inviting me in, so whatever. I didn't live in LA. That's kind of part of the deal. If I had moved to LA and I had actually gone to New York to meet Bill, which I had a chance to do, and I said no because I was afraid to go to New York. I was afraid to go to New York for many years, and then I became unafraid, and then I had no opportunities, and now I'm afraid again to go to New York. So that's my New York story. Anyhow, so they moved the shop to ABC. That was big money at the time. It was the 90s. Television was still making a lot of money. The show was a big hit. They were paying union wages, and ABC was showering them with money and getting big sponsors. So that's probably where he made big money. And the network system was already in place. There were reruns, not as many as like a regular show like Seinfeld or something. But there were still reruns, so he would be paid for that too. He'd be paid as talent. He'd be paid as a writer. Probably got paid as a producer. He got paid on many levels. And any royalties that came out of merchandising or whatever, I'm sure he got a piece of. His agent would have negotiated all that. So he probably made a good chunk of change when he moved to ABC. That was his first big, giant pile of money. And so at that point in 2012, he invested in the Mets. He became a minority stakeholder in the New York Mets for about $20 million. And now that was a risk. He could have lost all that money. He didn't. Then somebody, a billionaire, bought the Mets for $2.4 billion, and he basically quadrupled his money. His payout was about $80 million. So, yeah, he's worth some money. And when you have that kind of cash on hand that you can invest in the New York Mets, your money's just making money. You don't just put your money in a bank. You put your money in the stocks and hedge funds. He's probably got so many investments he can't even keep track of them all. That's why he probably has a staff to do that. He probably has multiple accountants. He probably has his own lawyer. He probably has at least one personal assistant, if not several. He probably has a guy who just takes care of his house. He can afford it. He can certainly afford it. But his overhead is very high. He has a personal staff, right? Where is it here? Yeah, here's his house. 7 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, over 4,000 square feet, about $7 million house in Beverly Hills. In Beverly Hills, that's a big-ish house. I mean, it's a big house. There's no denying it's a big, expensive house. He's got a pool, but everybody in LA has a pool. But, in another part of the country, he'd have an estate. And really, in Beverly Hills, it's a pretty good house. It's not the house, but it's pretty good. And he has to have this house. He needs a house like this. Because number one, he needs big security. He made a lot of money. He shouldn't have to live in an apartment. I mean, a little apartment. No. Unless he was super ultra cheap. But he'd still need tons of security. So an apartment in LA would be stupid. So he has a big house. He needs people around him. Because again, he has lots of money. He has lots of investments. He needs to keep track of it all. So he needs to outsource that. He's supposed to be making comedy and doing the show. And maybe coming up with new shows, which he recently did. So he can't just, you know, he can't just spend his money all day. And you want to enjoy your money. He made a lot of money. Why shouldn't he enjoy it? Now, his family was kind of well off to begin with. He went to Cornell. But now he's like really rich. Now he could stop working. No doubt. However, his overhead's very high. If he stops working, think about all the people he's paying. He's got to be spending, I don't know, probably close to $1 million a year just on overhead. The property taxes on this house. He's definitely got a mortgage, because it would be stupid not to have a mortgage, because you could write some of that off on your taxes. He may have positioned this house as some kind of business investment, because who the hell wants to pay off this house? You don't get rewarded for that in this wacky world of extending endless credit. And then he may never pay off the house, and when he decides to move out, he'll sell it to somebody else, and who cares? Even if he takes a loss, it's like, well, it was like I was paying rent. I got most of my money back, or some of it. But still, it's a big overhead. He's got to pay taxes on this house. He's probably got a payroll for his own employees. He can't pay them nothing. He's got to pay them decently. He relies on these people. Some of these people handle his money. He's got an agent, or probably a manager, or both. He's probably with an agency, and he has a manager, which means they both get a percentage of his pay, whatever that is. Now, with an agent's standard is 10%. Well, with a manager, well, that's probably going to be more. It's probably going to be closer to 15 to 20. And that's on anything they bring in. That may include the show, because that agent or manager may have gotten him the show. So right off the top, he's losing 10% of his income. So that $10 million a year drops immediately to $9 million. Then he's got to pay his taxes. Well, what's the taxes on $10 million? Well, it's probably, I don't know, it's over 40%, I would say. Let's just say it's 40% for the sake of argument. That's another $4 million. So he's already lost half his money. Now, I'm not crying for the guy. That's still $5 million. But now he's got to pay the overhead on his house and his various people around him. Probably cost him $1 million a year. So he's probably, and then, there's just money that he spends or just disappears. A lot of celebrities, they can't keep track of it all. I had a friend, they had a service. This is a thing in LA. They pay all your bills. They decided they were supposed to pay her taxes. They never did. Got in a lot of trouble. Cost her a lot of money. So, could have some of that. I mean, look at what happened to Nick Cage. Nick Cage got caught up in, I guess it was the Bernie Madoff thing, or it was one of his managers. I don't remember. But he lost a lot of money. I don't think he was broke, but he could have been on the verge of going broke, because, again, a guy like Nick Cage, he has to live in a house like this. They're not going to hire him for a big-name movie. He can't go to the parties. Now, Bill is not a movie guy anymore. He was in a few movies earlier in his career, but he is in the mode of what he's in. He's host of, what's-his-face? Real Time. And that's fine, whatever. But a lot of overhead there. So let's say he wants to pay for the show. He wants to pay for all the crew, the office. There's an office. I mean, a whole freaking office. You need an office. They have to negotiate with every guest on the show. There's probably pre-interviews, or, there's payroll for the show. Accountants. Some of this could be outsourced, some of it can't. There's contracts involved. There's a contract with HBO. That contract may expire. He may be going back on the air because he doesn't want the show to die. And if the show dies, then he has to go and renegotiate his own contract, and for everybody else. Maybe they say, well, The rumor is this is all going to end at the end of the year. They're waiting for the end of the year for whatever fiscal reasons, and then the studios are going to cave and give these guys money. That's a rumor. So let's say that's true. Or Bill, being an insider guy, would have knowledge of that. His people are telling him, they're going to end the strike in December. You go back on the air, yeah, for a while people will be mad at you, but in December you can bring everybody back. And then that way there's a show. If you don't bring people back, they'll cancel your contract, there'll be no show, and you'll have to wait until the new year to try to get the show back. And maybe they don't want it back. Maybe he's too old. Maybe they want a new host. Maybe they want a new show. Maybe they want to pay him less money. And therefore, everybody else would get paid less money, perhaps. At least the higher ups. Maybe they don't want to do real time anymore. Maybe they want to do his new show where he gets high with a celebrity or something. I don't think there are any writers on that show. That's probably the show he should do. Now, I'm not defending his lifestyle. He does have a high-end lifestyle. You work all your life in comedy. I met a lot of stand-up guys, and I was one of them. I was a young guy. What did I want to do? I wanted to be famous and rich and bang starlets. Bill Maher's famous and rich, and he bangs starlets. Or at least he used to. I haven't heard a lot of rumors about him recently, but back in the day, oh yeah. There were pictures of him with these hot girls that he probably couldn't get on a bet back in the day before he was famous. I mean, if you're a young guy, can you blame him? Now you might say, well, he wasn't a young guy even in the 90s, but he was youngish. And again, that's why you kind of do it. You get into it because that's what it is. You're a stand-up comic going to open mic nights. Nobody knows who the hell you are. You're hanging out with your comedian friends, and you're hoping you catch a break. He caught a break. Now, his family was rich already, but he caught a big break, and he was able to support himself. And that first level, oh my God, that's a revelation to most people in, doing entertainment. Oh my God, I can support myself on my comedy, on my books or my comics. It's like, it's like the most wonderful feeling in the world for a performer, for someone in the business. But then there's the next level. Then you get more success. And then you start to get a little comfortable. And when you start to get comfortable, well, now maybe you want things. Well, what did you want when you started? Well, you wanted to bang starlets and be rich and famous. So, that's part of the lifestyle too. Again, I'm not necessarily condoning that. Although, I'd be a hypocrite to say that I didn't want exactly that. I mean, if I had hit success like Bill Maher has when I was younger, I'd probably be exactly like him. I'd probably be exactly like him. I'd probably be banging starlets 2 at a time. Going to restaurants, driving a Ferrari, filling my life with stuff and impressive things. My vibe is, yeah, that's something younger guys do. But then they get older and they realize, oh, this is kind of empty experience. Now, Bill doesn't have a family, I don't think, but I don't know. A lot of the older guys have finally, Robert De Niro and Al Pacino both just had a kid. So maybe he's finally angling that way. I don't know. Maybe he's finally saying, you know what? I should settle down. I don't know, how old is he? He's got to be at least as old as me, probably older. He's got to be in his 60s, maybe? But that's the other thing, too. You finally make it, and then the object of the game is to stay on top, to stay young, looking at least, to stay relevant. And you got to hand it to the guy. He's been around for a long time. And he said some off-the-cuff stuff that got him in trouble, but also got him attention. And unlike most guys in the business, I feel like part of that stuff, what he said, was part performance, but part strategic to get him that attention so he could stay relevant. But along the way, you have a crew of guys who are loyal to you that helped you along the way, Some of those guys aren't writers. Some of those guys, I mean, one of them would be his agent. His agent's not making any money right now. If he's not performing, he's not making money either. He might be saying to Bill, you should go on the road. You should go on the road if you're not gonna do your show. And well, when's the strike gonna end? And they probably go back and forth all day about this. And they probably have for months. And, think about all the work you would put in just to get to this level. And then suddenly you have to stop and you're waiting for this damn strike to end. And it's been 4 months. They should have already been in production already. They should have all been ready to go. It's hard enough to just do it. So again, I'm not condoning his lifestyle or the studios or anything. I'm just trying to explain there's more to it than that. Could he pay the crew? Sure. I don't know. I ballparked it yesterday about $500,000 a month. I think that would be very minimal. Let's say that's true. Still a lot of money. Yeah, you could say, well, he's got to be worth, let's say conservatively. The celebrity net worth said 140 million. I saw one site that said 190 million. He at least made $60 million on his Mets deal. So, I don't know. He spent a lot of money too. He's got an overhead. I'm ballparking it at probably between his taxes and his agent and his lifestyle. It's probably $6 or $7 million a year. So let's say he's banking $3 million a year. Let's say he banked that much, I don't know, every year. He's been in the business since politically incorrect 30 years ago. So let's say conservatively he could bank about 90 mil. Okay, so he's worth about 90 million. Well, first off, it's not sitting in a bank somewhere like a giant pile of gold coins. It's all in investments. Just like Trump, it's all in investments. Trump's a billionaire, but most of his money's in real estate. And when you have that much money, you got to keep your money out there in stuff so you're not constantly paying for it, or so it's not just sitting there not making you money. Because when you have that much money, the money makes money. So he's probably got investments. His money's in hedge funds, real estate, who knows? Chicken franchises, I don't know. So how much money does he have on hand would be the question. Does he want to sell, I don't know, say he owns a string of clothing stores. Does he want to sell off the clothing stores just so he could dump money on his old crew? There's a saying in Hollywood. It's similar to the saying that lawyers have. Lawyers have a saying, only a fool has himself for a client. In Hollywood, it's a similar saying. It's something like, only a fool invests in his own projects. So the rule in Hollywood is, if you have a movie or a TV show or whatever, you don't put your own money in it. Because to put your own money in it is to risk it bigly. And in this case, he wouldn't even be risking it. He'd just be losing it. He'd just be handing out money to people, his friends. But it kind of sets a bad precedent too, right? So let's say, okay, he starts blowing $500,000 a month. And strike goes on to December, September, October, November, December. So he blows $2 million, paying off his guys, gets him through the time, and he's a big hero. Okay. And then the strike settled for the writers and the actors. And then the camera union goes on strike. Well, now the writers and the actors say, hey, you're going to pay us, right? I mean, you paid those guys. What if the show goes off the air? Hey, Bill, I can't pay my mortgage anymore. Why don't you just fund the show? He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to put himself in that position. Also, what if I don't know, what if something happens to one of the crew or something? Does he pay him more? Does he pay this guy less? Once you start paying people, things get very real. I don't think he wants to do that. He doesn't want to endanger his own money. He doesn't want to pay his own money. He wasn't paying them money to begin with. He doesn't have the dispute. It's the producers, the studios that are effing everybody. Not him. So when he says, I want to help the crew, he does. But he doesn't want to take it out of his own pocket. Now you could say, oh, that's not right. He doesn't need the money. Yeah, but it's not about what you need. He is wealthy. He worked hard. He built a career. He has a lifestyle. He wants to maintain that lifestyle. Just like you want to maintain your lifestyle, whatever it is. When you get to that level, you ain't going back down. You know what it's like to be not famous or to be famous and not rich? That's when the paparazzi follow you around and your decline. They follow around Bridget Fonda and Kelly McGinnis. They're older. They're heavy set. They're like following them around. They're done. They're trying to live normal lives now, but the paparazzi still bother them. They would do the same thing to Bill Maher, right? They'd be like, oh, Bill Maher, once the king of late night, he was at a supermarket the other day where he got into an argument over a shopping cart. You might say, well, what's the big deal? The big deal is I wouldn't want that. I had a little taste of that, and it sucked. I had a TV show, and I was mildly famous in my area, and sometimes people would recognize me when I had to go back to my day job. And at first, they'd be like, hey, cool, you're that guy from the TV show. And I'd be like, yeah. And they'd be like, wait a minute, why are you working here? It sucks. It sucks. Because they all assumed I was rich. And I'm not. And in fact, I looked myself up on one of these celebrity sites that I register on. And they say I'm a millionaire. I'm worth $1 to $5 million. I'm nowhere near that. Some days I have to calculate how much money I have left for bread. So, yeah. Though these sites aren't particularly accurate. How could they be? His finances are private. He could be leveraged up the wazoo. He could have invested in something and lost a bunch of money. You don't know what he's invested in. Yeah, he made money on that Mets deal. He could have gambled it away. Who knows? Who knows where his money is? He could be blackmailed and had to pay somebody. He could have several baby mamas we don't know about. Who knows? Or he could just be looking at his bills going, Jesus, I spent a ton of money. But he makes a ton of money, so it balances out. But if you make, a couple of $100K a year, you're not going to live in the crappiest apartment just to save money. You're going to live in a nice place. He makes millions of dollars. He lives in a nice place. He has to at a certain level. I'm not saying he doesn't have the money to pay his crew. He could, but it probably sets a bad precedent. And he wouldn't get that money back. And maybe he doesn't want to pay all of them. Maybe he doesn't know half the crew. Probably knows most of them. Probably knows all of them. But maybe only a handful of those guys have been with him since the beginning. The other guys are just workers. They go on to work on different shows. It's not his responsibility necessarily to take care of everybody. Where people might be able to criticize him, I would say, is that he is talent. And he is SAG because he would have to be, because he was on ABC and he was the talent. And SAG is the talent, the people on TV. He would have to be a member of SAG, I believe, to host the show. Drew Barrymore is definitely a member of SAG. She had a movie career. Oh, Bill would have been a SAG member in his very early movie career, but he wasn't in movies very much. That would, to me, be a violation of the SAG rules, that they would perform at all, even in an unscripted situation. But, again, they don't really need the money at all. They don't need the unions. And that's part of the problem with the unions. The people who really don't need them The millionaires don't need them at all. The people who are in the unions, well, they don't really need them either, to a certain extent. Some of them need the union is a weird turn of phrase, actually, because who needs the union? They're very tough to get in. Once you get in, because you have to be paid a certain wage, they're just not going to hire you for, they're just going to make sure the budget comes under budget. They have to. So they might agree to pay you for a day's worth of work, but you might have to do 3 days of work to prepare for it. Something like that. Because we're only going to pay you for that one day, so be ready on the set. Make sure you go to makeup early. Make sure you get the costume fitting all on your own time. See, that's kind of the way around it. Yeah, even though you're getting paid this great union wage, and then you might only work one day in a month. That's the problem with unions. Now, if it was different, you'd get paid less, but maybe you'd work more. So he could pay the crew. There's no doubt he probably could pay the crew, but it would cost a lot of money. He wouldn't get any of that money back, and he might be paying people he doesn't necessarily feel beholden to. On top of the fact that, I don't know, it may violate certain rules, and if the show doesn't come back, it could be over forever. And then no one's coming back when the strike is settled. Then, let's say he says, oh, I'm going to stay with the strikers. Then December rolls around, they settle the strike, and like, oh, we're not going to do the show anymore. And then what would Bill do? Well, he'd go back on tour, and he'd probably go back to doing a show where he gets high with a celebrity. I don't think he has any writers on that show. Right? Now, he might develop another show, or they might say, well, your show, you're done. You're done. You're old. We're going to get a new guy, pay him half the rate, and it's going to be the same damn show, but we'll call it something different. Now, what would those writers do? They'd go work for that show. And Bill would be left with his Beverly Hills mansion and all the overhead, and he wouldn't get any reward for that. They might say, oh, you're a good guy. Yeah, can you help me do this show? Oh, I can't work for you for free. Oh, but I paid you. I paid you for 5 months. I paid you for 4 months. I spent $2 million to pay you guys. Yeah, but I still got a mortgage to pay. So, I don't think Jeremy has necessarily a bad take. I think there are plenty of guys in Hollywood that were arrogant and stupid, and some of them are in the Writers Guild, some of them are a lot of them are in the Actors Guild. I don't think Bill is particularly a good target for this. Drew Barrymore, I think, is a better target. I think she's kind of a little bit pompous. I had a different view of her before, but now looking at the way she acts on her new show, it's like, she's not acting the way I thought she was as a person. I had a different view of her. Now I've seen more of her. It's like, you're kind of full of yourself. Bill Maher, for all his faults, is at heart a stand-up comic. And stand-up comics are self-depreciating, and they're willing to examine themselves a little more closely than other people. Say what you want about him. Yeah, he's got an ego. Part of it's performing, too. You work all your life to perform. You want to keep performing. One of the people, Jeremy, he kind of slams him a little, is Clint Eastwood. And you could slam Clint Eastwood for being old. He's old. But the guy's a genius. I mean, his movies right now, at the end of his career, at the end of his life, man, they're finely crafted. They really are. Some of his best movies are his late work. Gran Turismo. Yeah, you could say he looked pretty old in that movie, but he was playing an old man in that movie. And I thought he was great in it. You may disagree. Um, Clint Eastwood is just so good, uh, you know, and he is definitely not a typical Hollywood guy. He's more based, he's more conservative, he's very old Hollywood, um, obviously, and he's not one of the guys I would consider Hollywood elites. He's very, very famous. He's definitely in the mix, but he's not necessarily a guy who went to parties and networked and all that kind of stuff. Not necessarily. Not now, anyway. Bill Maher, probably still in those parties. Although he strikes me as the kind of guy who stands to the side and kind of sneers at everybody. So, look at these a-holes. Does that make him cool? Well, makes him slightly cooler than most of the people at those parties, I would say. But, once you have a name for yourself, then it's about how much work can you do? What kind of projects did you always want to do? Jeremy's a YouTuber, right? He's had some success. He's doing ProPublica. That's like his new project. He wouldn't be able to do that without all his money and success. And look, he takes care of his people, and I appreciate that too, but if he somehow moved into the arena where his workers were unionized, well, it'd be a bit of a different story, right? He'd be in a similar situation, negotiating with his workers or the studios or waiting for the strike to end, and he'd have to say to himself, geez, every day I'm off of YouTube, I'm losing viewers, I'm losing money, I gotta start doing my videos again. And let's say he had writers. I don't think Jeremy has writers. Maybe on the news side. He might say, well, I still have guys who run my coffee company or whatever, and I'm financing the coffee company thanks to the YouTube videos. Plus, I'm paying my bills and whatnot. He might be in the position, like the studio is, or like Bill Maher is, that he would have to somehow keep doing the show just to get some income coming in so he wouldn't lose money. So, and look, the scales for Bill Maher are like off the charts compared to Jeremy. I don't mean to compare them like they're worth the same amount of money, but Jeremy's doing okay. And I'm not slamming him either. Don't take this as a slam to anybody, please. But I'm just saying, I think it's more complicated than that. And the unions in Hollywood, they don't necessarily have a great rep. People join them because they have to. I've heard actors complain about the unions big time. Writers, I've heard them complain. I mean, I've heard pretty much everybody complain about the unions because they're tough to get in. And then once you're in, then you got to obey the rules. And then you got to sometimes turn down work because it's not a union gig, or you got to keep going to the union to keep getting waivers and permission to do non-union work. So you can argue that they're necessary. But when you're outside the union, you can do whatever you want. You can negotiate whatever you want. Now, maybe you end up negotiating less or working for less, but at least you're working. It's kind of tough. And look, you've heard me complain about the writers and actors on this channel a million effing times. They have, I think, fallen into a trap. I think the studios wanted these strikes. Keep in mind, the same studios that publish this media, that make these TV shows and movies, also control the entertainment media and the news media for a large extent. It's the same companies. So all these news stories about the She-Hulk writers, these actors bragging and calling everybody bigots. Now, do I think it was a plan, like a cabal plan 10 years ago? No. But they can look the way the wind is blowing and say, hey, we want to get these guys on strike. Why don't we up the ante on this drama, gives us more clicks, sells us more newspapers, as they used to say, will ruin their reputation a bit, tarnish them up, and then when they go on strike, nobody will care. And we'll also downplay it in the media, and no one will care. So look what's happening. No one cares. And part of that is the death of television, but part of that is the arrogance that these people have exhibited. Has Bill exhibited arrogance? Yeah, but not like a lot of people. I don't think he was calling a lot of people bigots. He wasn't particularly woke, although he does seem to have TDS. He got late on the cancel culture. He's mildly anti-woke. He's a bit red-pilled at times. He's like the liberal who's sort of closest to the center on a lot of issues. And once in a while he says something red-pilled. So he's kind of the wrong target. Drew Barrymore, on the other hand, seems way more woke. And certainly most of these movie stars are very, very woke. Most of them. And these TV people. I mean, but to some extent, if you're an actor working in Hollywood and you get on a show like Star Trek and the show is terrible, but it's going to pay you $100,000 this year, and you've never made $100,000 in your life, and you've been living in a crappy apartment in LA, and now you can go to a good apartment. Yeah, that's about all you can afford in LA, or $100K. And the world is opening up to you. There's going to be more work. Maybe it's a reoccurring character. Other shows are interested. You're on the fast track at your agency. You know, it's kind of hard to turn down. Yeah, the shows suck. For actors, a lot of the shows suck. For real actors who like to perform in Broadway, who like to perform plays and dramas, they hate all the TV. They hate a lot of TV. Very little TV is interesting to them. They've done that a million times. Even on like a good TV show, like, I don't know, Law and Order or something. It's boring to an actor. They're doing crazy stuff in their classes and, stuff only people on actors would like anyway. So to some extent that helps create the bubble, but they've always sort of been in a bubble, an artistic bubble. But the woke stuff, like, hey, if you want to work, you're going to be woke, or at least you're going to pay it lip service. Just like back in the day, you would pay lip service to being a hippie, or lip service to not be a hippie. To say, oh, I don't have any views on religion, or I think it's fine that people go to church every Sunday. That's a good thing, or I love America, or whatever they had to say in the era where you had to say certain things to have the right image, because that's what actors do. But you notice that a lot of the image of these actors and writers have been tarnished recently, and I blame that on the studios. I think the studios had a hand in accelerating that process, so when they went on strike, there'd be no support for them. If the viewers were supporting the strikers, really supporting the strikers, as they were 15 years ago, it would be a different story. The studios would feel some pressure to end the strike, and that's the mistake these guys have made. They've fallen into a position where they thought everybody loved them, and they just don't anymore. There's too much competition. They've burned their own bridge with their audience. They think they're above us, and now they're paying the price. So I don't feel bad necessarily for a lot of those writers, especially the writers on She-Hulk and a few other shows who ought to be kicked out of entertainment. But people are going to lose their houses. And there are some people who will leave acting and writing altogether. People do it all the time. There are actors, semi-famous ones, someone you might recognize, They leave, never come back. Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies was very famous. Everybody knows who Jethro is, or at least from my era they do, because I used to watch Beverly Hillbillies all the time on reruns. And he was hilarious. He left the show, took his money, opened a car dealership, has like a string of car dealerships in LA, I think, somewhere, and did very well for himself. But he's not Jethro anymore. He's not an actor anymore. He was handsome for a while. He used that handsomeness to make a bunch of money, and then he turned it into car dealerships, and now he's out acting. Yeah, it's possible to do. Some people just blow all their money. Bill Maher could be a guy who blows all his money, but it doesn't sound like he's doing it. It sounds like he's making some sound investments. Made some good investments, so he's doing well for himself. So he's always going to be rich. And one of the ways you stay rich is you don't spend your money. So I don't blame him for not investing his money into the project. I kind of don't blame him for touting the strike. Again, he may have the inside track. He may know the studios are going to crush these guys. He may have gotten the word months ago. Oh, they're going to crush them. They're gonna drag this out to December. People are going to lose their homes. Bill, if you don't go back on the air, they're going to cancel your show, and then these guys won't have any work when they come back. And so maybe he's picked the lesser of two evils. Anyhow, that's my rant. Again, I'm not throwing shade at my old boss. I'm not throwing shade at Jeremy. Just giving you my perspective. And that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. Check us out on Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble for our more base takes. I'm going to be at the comic book store today at 4 p.m. Jeez, it's probably 4 o'clock already after that rant. We'll see you in the next one.